Good morning, everybody. Deacon Tim Wyman here, and once again, it's the Parish Coffee Hour with Father Paul and friends. This week, we are meeting about 30 minutes earlier than we usually do. We had a special scheduling we need to work out for our guest, and we made it work. So, just want to welcome everybody. If hopefully you tuned in last night or yesterday afternoon, you saw us putting the new bell tower in position up there, and we hope to be able to do a little more live streaming, I think tomorrow when we put up the steeple and the next step here. So stay tuned for more details about that. But today, I want to turn it over to Father Paul as we get started here with the coffee hour. Take it away, Father Paul.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And Deacon Tim, thanks for jazzing our program up a little bit more. I appreciate that. It is a gloomy day out there, but lots going on as we're getting ready for the next stage with the installation of the steeple, and we'll have the Oktoberfest raffle tomorrow night, and of course over the weekend is Halloween, and already our children are in a safe mode as they're doing some fun things, with pumpkins and wearing costumes and things like that, and probably they got more than one mask on as they're trying to stay safe over in the school. Well, we're glad you're with us today, and with us is Dr. Stephen Stack, a member of our parish, who's also the Kentucky Public Health Commissioner. So what we'll want to do today is just get some insights into what it's like for him and what it's like for all of us in the midst of the pandemic. And we believe that everybody's got a story, and in addition to the work that you're doing, there's I know a sense of mission with that. So we'll be talking about that. I'll start us off with a prayer, though, as we enter into the program. Lord, we give thanks to you for this day and for the challenge that comes our way day after day, as you continue to work with us, as you continue to bless us and give us strength and wisdom, and bless us so that we can have the right kind of discipline as we do what we need to do, and as we trust that as we get through all this, we can be better as individuals and as a community. Bless us as we enter into this reflection time, that we'll be able to look at our own ideals and how we're living in harmony with those ideals. Bless us as we seek to praise you in what we do, and as we respond to the unexpecteds of this day. So we pray to you through Christ our Lord. Well, Dr. Stack, thanks for being with us today, and thanks for all you are doing to help us in our community. You've been in this position before there was the pandemic, and probably a good starting point would be what was a typical day like for you prior to the pandemic?
Well, and thank you, Father Paul, for having me, and for Deacon Tim for having me. I became health commissioner on February 10th, and the first patient with COVID-19 in Kentucky was announced March 6th. So I didn't have a long time to be a normal health commissioner. I think in a normal world, probably very few people know who the health commissioner is for the state. And this is not a normal world, and that's not the journey I was given. And so I don't know what normal would be like for this job, because I'm not going to have that experience for a while. Before I started this on February 10th, I was a practicing emergency physician, and I'd worked at St. Joseph East for 13 and a half years. And then I had also started doing some shifts in another hospital called the Christ Hospital in downtown Cincinnati at the beginning of this calendar year. And so in that setting, it's quite possible that some of our parishioners saw me as a physician in the emergency department at St. Joe East over the years. And obviously, that's a very different experience. When I became health commissioner, this job, just to give people a sense for what public health does to support Kentucky and healthy Kentuckians, we have about 450 state health employees who work in partnership with a total of about 2,500 to 3,000 local health department workers across the state, who every day work to support 4.5 million Kentuckians across 120 counties. And we do things like help people with hypertension, diabetes, healthy mothers, healthy babies, vaccinations, certain other kinds of environmental support. We test milk for safety. We test pools. We inspect restaurants and bars across the state for food safety. We run a high complexity laboratory that does newborn screening for testing and does all sorts of other advanced testing that's only available at a state public health lab. So this department does a wide array of services for Kentuckians. And of course, it also does COVID-19. And in my role as health commissioner, because we've had this once in a century pandemic, it's obviously changed my journey in this role. So I hope that gives some perspective for what public health does at the state level.
Yeah, good. How'd you get to this position? You say you began in February.
Good fortune or bad fortune, I guess it's a matter of perspective, but yeah. I would say it's been good fortune. And so whenever new governors are elected, they frequently, and new presidents of the United States, they frequently have transition teams and they have application websites. And so I submitted an application like others, and was interviewed by the governor-elect and interviewed by the cabinet secretary, and ultimately was offered the opportunity to serve. Now, and that's a little simplistic, because my background before this, in addition to being an emergency physician, I've had a number of leadership opportunities and privileges in the medical profession, including serving as president of the American Medical Association in 2015 to 16. And so I think I've had some significant additional experience that probably helped me in my qualifications, to serve in this role. And so, but I applied for the job just like anyone else would apply for a job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Let's go back a bit. You've been a physician for some time. What led to your decision as a young man or boy even to become a physician?
The way I've over the years come to describe this is a pretty pragmatic decision. I think some people find a vocation, other people find a very practical path through life. And I have a deep and abiding curiosity for science, and I have had a long-standing enjoyment for interacting with people. My father was a salesman who worked from home a lot, so I would hear him doing his sales work on telephone calls throughout the days. I think that has helped to, imbue me a bit with this desire to interact with other folks. And then over my journey, I did public speaking and got involved in organized activities in high school and in college, and then of course through medical school and beyond. So when I went to college, I decided, well, I like people and I like science, and medicine seemed like a good way to blend those two things together. Now, I grew up with a friend of mine all the way from kindergarten onward. We went to the same grade school, high school, and college along that journey. I can remember in third or fourth grade determining he would be a heart surgeon when he grew up. And by golly, he went on to be a heart surgeon when he grew up. I think he had a very decided focus at a young age. I, on the other hand, sort of bumbled along the path that seemed to combine the things that I enjoyed the most. Now, I will say, Father, we go through different experiences in our lives and certain moments of revelation. What began as a pragmatic decision clearly became something of a vocation for me. So a number of years ago, I had the opportunity to contemplate whether I was willing to leave my clinical practice to do essentially a management job. And I realized at that time that while I started on a practical path to be a physician, it had become a very deeply seated part of my life and my identity. And I was unwilling to let go of my clinical practice. So I would say that it has become for me the vocation that it did not originally begin as.
This is a sort of an active interviewer. I'll say too that at least the family story in the Prable world is that when I was in the second grade, I was already saying, when I grew up, I'm going to be a priest. It's amazing how all that works. How whether it's some social factors or whether it's the grace of God working. A lot of times we just sort of know in a way that's deeper than the rational. So, anyways, you've had a lot of background too in Catholic education, haven't you, in your formation?
I have, as a matter of fact. So I went to St. Mark's Elementary School in Cleveland. I went to St. Ignatius High School in Cleveland. And I went to the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts for college. That's this is coffee with Father Paul. So I brought my coffee cup here. But so I had 8 years of Jesuit education. And of course, I feel I've had an abundance of blessings in my life. I couldn't be more grateful. In St. Ignatius High School and Holy Cross High School, or Holy Cross College, I studied Latin and Greek. So I did 8 years of Latin and 6.5 years of classical Greek along the way, which has been one of the many gifts I've had in life. So one of the things I'm looking forward to tonight, I need a little bit of a break. So I have a book I'm reading. I just started on 3rd century AD Roman Empire from the Emperor Severus to Constantine. So I'm still a bit of a nerd, and I celebrate that. I don't feel too embarrassed by it. So I'm looking forward to spending a couple hours tonight reading about the 3rd century Roman Empire.
Yeah, that does raise that issue of how are you taking care of yourself in this time frame? It's emotionally grueling in addition to, I'm sure, long hours.
It is, Father, and it's been a different journey, though. So remember, when I started in February, I came into a big department, 450 employees, a lot of complexity, covers the whole state, and I knew nothing about it except what I was able to prepare in the weeks ahead before I started. And then the whole world changed, and we're facing this crisis of a magnitude that humanity really hasn't faced, as an infectious threat, really since the 1918 influenza epidemic. And so it has been quite the journey. In the earlier months, when we were in the phase of shutting things down and trying to keep people safe from this enormous unknown that was overwhelming big cities and was really terrifying. I would wake up at 4:30 in the morning and pretty much get up and start reading and preparing, and then drive to Frankfurt. It's about a 40-minute drive from Lexington, and then spend the day dealing with all sorts of insolvable problems for which there were no answers, and yet decisions had to be made, and you had to do the best you could. And then generally not get home until 7:30 or 8 at night, and have to finish up some stuff, go to bed, and wake up the next morning and do it all over again. We've had different ebbs and flows along the way. In the summer, we had a bit of a reprieve. We had a few weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, where things seemed relatively calm. And I was able to get out of here at 5 o'clock at night and get home before 6. It felt like I had a whole new life experience. and now things are ramping up again, and so the days get a bit longer. And so I actually feel very fortunate. I think my prior life experiences prepared me fairly well. I think my upbringing with my family, my Catholic education, my Jesuit education, I think all of those things have been very helpful to me. My love of history, and I actively read history and biography to try to help keep myself grounded and keep a perspective on life, because it's very easy in the moment to think that what we face is the biggest challenge the world has seen before. It's a very big challenge. For some, it's tragically stressful because there's a lot of people hurting through loss of job, loss of social connection, a lot of things that people are having to sacrifice now. But for me personally, keeping that attention to reading history and keeping things in perspective has helped me a great deal, I think. And so I feel okay right now. It doesn't mean it's not stressful and a strain, but I feel okay. I worry more about all the people we're trying to help and the great difficulties and impediments there are, and disagreements in society. I'll have to say that's a challenge because some don't perceive what we're doing as help. They perceive it as interference. And that's a difficult balancing act. And I'm sensitive to it. And yet we have to still persist and try to find ways to assist the most people we possibly can. So, but thank you for asking. I feel like I'm doing just fine at the moment. I do wish I could get back to my regular old life like all of us do. I used to go to the Tulip and Suggins right across, over there by the Cathedral. Those were regular places we went. And of course, I don't go out to restaurants now because in my position, too many people recognize me. And it's also just a particularly unfortunate time. That's a high risk place to get infected. So it's been a challenge.
Yeah. I've very, very rarely eaten in a restaurant. I've pick up and go every once in a while. And, a lot more just cooking at home. And Deacon Tim, help us along, because sometimes there'll be a question that'll flash up, and I might be concentrating on Dr. Stack and not get it totally. I think a question that's out there that people have asked already is, what's it like to be on the report every day, with the radio and TV, and if you can get into that.
So I understood when I accepted this position, even before a pandemic, that it was a leadership role, and that I had the great privilege of being the equivalent of, if you will, of the Surgeon General for the state of Kentucky. And so I understood that there would be a need to communicate. I did not anticipate, I don't think any of us could have, that I would be called upon to stand beside the governor on an almost daily basis. I mean, for the first 4 to 6 weeks, we were doing daily press conferences from 5 to 6, 7 days a week. And so I never anticipated I would be doing that. I'll say it's been challenging at times. I have I hope, a fairly well-grounded humility about my own limitations. I don't believe I have all the answers. In fact, I'm quite confident I don't. But I do want to strive to inform people, and I do clearly have to share my assessment of the information and offer opinions. So I do that. I hope with a sense of awareness of my own limitations and a recognition of the value of certain humility with it. But I've done a lot of public speaking. I mean, I was for 11 years on the American Medical Association's board of trustees, and the past chairperson and the past president. I traveled the nation and the world speaking to physicians and other audiences. So I actually feel that my background prepared me for it and has helped me, I hope, to be able to connect with people. People don't have to always agree with you, but hopefully they can have confidence and some degree of trust that you're trying to be an honest broker in an imperfect world. And so I hope that I've been able to succeed in some small way in doing that, and be respectful along the way where people just have to agree to disagree. So again, it's been a privilege and an honor. I will say, since you mentioned this, I am very grateful to the governor. I have this privilege to be an advisor during a particularly stressful and difficult time in our state's history. And it's an honor to serve the community in that way. And I feel that I have a very good partner in government in the form of Governor Beshear. And I also feel that I have a very good boss I actually have at least a couple bosses, Secretary Friedlander and Governor Bashir, and I feel that I have wonderful collaborative partnerships with both, and I couldn't ask for a more supportive work environment. So I'm grateful for that.
It does seem to me, as I've watched the presentation quite a few times, that there's a real camaraderie that's been established between the two of you, and also the person who's the translator for the hearing impaired community. And my guess would be the people behind the scenes. And so I would just applaud all of you for that. It's it's hard to watch sometimes, and it's hard to say it's entertainment, but it's also it's real, and there's a warmth that comes through in the midst of it. So I thank you for that.
Well, I'll tell you, Father. So it occurs to me as I'm looking over my own shoulder. If you look over my shoulder, this was a bit of a joke up here. You see the governor. So that's not what that is in that frame. That's a picture pasted over a certificate. But we were doing, when he was in quarantine, we had to do 2 weeks for video press conferences, and he teased me on the press conference about all those other diplomas and stuff on my wall, and so I taped a picture of him over one of them in the back here. But I think the fact that we can tease each other and joke, I hope it does help Kentuckians have a little confidence that it certainly, I hope, conveys and shows that we're working well together, and that we're working in collaboration to try to help the public. And hopefully it makes us a little bit more real. I realize people don't get to come and talk to me personally, and certainly don't get to go talk to the governor personally on a regular basis. So hopefully it does convey that we really are just regular folks, just like the rest, trying to do the best we can to discharge our duties to Kentuckians.
Just to shift gears just a little bit in terms of the personal story, how long have you lived in Lexington? What brought you here, and how long have you been a member here at Christ the King?
So we moved to Lexington from Memphis, Tennessee in June of 2006. So it'll be, it's over 14 years now we've lived in Lexington. And I've been a member of Christ the King ever since then.
Okay. Great. Is there a way, again, I don't want to push it too far, but is there a way you could speak of your Catholic faith and how that's impacted your medical career, your medical work?
Yeah, so, it doesn't, none of this makes me feel uncomfortable in any way. It does make me feel sensitive that, again, I recognize that we all have a different journey in life. So yeah, my Catholic heritage is central to my identity. It's foundational in many ways. I think I have the same questions and challenges that many folks do as I try to struggle with where faith fits in my life, and how I certainly feel it gives me a basis in hopefully moral and ethical behavior. Certainly much of what the Pope says resonates with me about our attention to the poor and the vulnerable and the needy, and our mission to serve and to help every person reach their full human potential and be respected for their inherent human dignity. So a number of those things clearly resonate with me very well. I face the same struggles, I think, as anyone I shouldn't say anyone, but as many people in my own generation with how formal religion and fits into my life. And then I've had challenges too, because like many other people in society, I've had a really busy work schedule. So when I did my journey as American Medical Association leader, at its peak, I was traveling around the country 180 days a year or more. And I was still working in the emergency department. And for the first 4 years, I was the medical director of the emergency department at St. Joseph East. So, I would routinely have 25 or 26 out of 30 days scheduled, and half the month not even be in the state of Kentucky because I was traveling. So I think it is very difficult to have any kind of regularity in your life and a regular cadence when you lead that kind of existence. And I think that's part and parcel of a very portable world where we could, before COVID, got on airplanes and could travel all over the place to do work. So my faith is very important to me, but I also would say that I'm on a similar journey to many people in their late 40s, trying to ascertain and discern what its role and place is in my life. And I know that's a little bit cryptic, but I guess I don't really have a much better answer for that.
Well, sure. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. I've been called rarely to to anoint somebody who's dying of COVID, and so really all that happens is all that happens. I mean, it's pretty significant. I go into the unit, but not into the room, and basically pray with the person from outside the room by means of phone. But one of the couple of things hit me. Certainly the need to be very careful up there, and so whatever it is to do, gloves and mask and even suit up, whatever they tell me to do, I'm glad to do it. I've noticed that it's been amazing, the appreciation that I can see on the face of the person who's on the other side in the glassed-in room. They know, and they've been isolated so much and just to know that that the church is offering prayers and sacrament. I've had a sense of wariness bordering on dread, so when I do that, and so I'll usually come home and put my clothes in the washer and take a shower. But I've also been touched by the typical folks who are part of that unit, and nobody that I would know by name, but just the respect and the gratitude that they would have for somebody coming up and praying in the midst of their unit. I'm sure you've been in some of the units, the COVID units. What's it been like from your standpoint and your experience?
Well, Father, and thank you for acknowledging the caregivers who are in the medical setting. I mean, look, I think we all have to appreciate so many people have been asked to sacrifice so much, and many of them haven't been asked. They've had to sacrifice. It wasn't a choice they were given. They've been placed in the position of difficulty, right? Their businesses were closed or reduced capacity, or they've had a loved one get sick, fall ill, maybe have lost a loved one. That's happened to close to 1,500 families in the state. And we're not one of the hardest hit states. We're in the bottom 20 of all states as far as the number of people who have died per population. So I know some will say I don't know anyone who's died, so it's not as bad as people make it sound. Well, that's because we've done all these steps in Kentucky. We have successfully kept ourselves on the good list by comparison to some areas that have gotten hit really badly here in the United States. And so, but I do worry, amidst all the many sacrifices, I do worry that the public may not appreciate just how much of a strain this is on the doctors, the nurses, the respiratory therapists, the food service folks, the ones working in the hospital, because in the spring, we didn't have enough equipment to keep them safe. Just flat out, we were unprepared for something like this as a nation, as was the whole world, quite honestly. We are better prepared now, but we are not prepared the way we need to be. I mean, we are having the entire world require gowns and gloves and masks at a scale that we have never needed anything close to this. And there's only so fast the supply chains have been able to provide all of that. So when you go in and you see those doctors and nurses, they're often working long hours. They've had, because like in emergency medicine, because so many people didn't go to the ER in the spring and the early summer because they were fearful of getting COVID, the numbers of patients who showed up really dropped. So in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of a time when the ER doctors and nurses could not be assured they were being kept safe, when there is nothing we can do to protect them with a vaccine or something else, in the midst of all that stress, and when they had fear and worry about would they come home and was taking a shower and changing their clothes enough, or would they infect their family and endanger them? In the midst of all that stress, they had their hours cut, they had their pay cut, and still showed up to work. So I really would like, and that's doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, others. I do think all of society owes an incredible debt of gratitude to the healthcare professionals who have sacrificed quite a lot to still show up to work and take care of people in their time of need. I think it is a very inspiring and very humanistic sort of testimony to people's humanity and their willingness to come in when times are difficult, even at great potential cost or sacrifice to themselves. And I think all of society should not take that for granted, because as things get worse now, hospitalizations will increase and more people will need their service. And I think that gratitude you expressed is for me, as a career-long emergency physician for 20 plus years, is very appreciated. Now, as far as going into COVID units, I'm going to use this point, Father, to make to tell a different story. One of the particularly cruel things about this disease is at a time when people are scared, people are hurting, and people would normally come together to support each other, the disease forces us to be apart from each other. So sometimes when something as simple as a hug or a kiss on the cheek would go such a long way, what I and others have told you have to do is stay 6 feet away from everybody and wear a mask so you can't even see facial expressions. I understand how isolating and difficult this has been. So I traveled a couple of weeks ago and went into 2 hospitals briefly to say thank you to the medical community and leadership there in Western and Southern Kentucky. But I haven't gone into COVID units specifically because were I to do that and get infected, I go back into the governor's office on an almost daily basis. And so I can't do that. In fact, I was intending to continue practicing emergency medicine while I was health commissioner. But on March 1st, I had to make the decision to discontinue my clinical shifts until further notice, because to go into a setting where I increased my risk of becoming infected, and then taking that back to the Capitol was just a risk that I could not afford to subject, the governor and the rest of the team to, because the state's relying too much on all of them. So anyway, so that's part of my journey and the difficulty where it's been isolating for me, because I would have loved to have gone back into my colleagues with whom I have worked for so many years to say thank you personally. But it's just a place that it is better that I don't go into at the moment because of not because of my worry about personal risk, but because of the other people I could expose to that.
Yeah, I think anybody who's in public, has contact with the public, there's a wariness and a fear of being infected and passing it on. I hate to do that, of course, with our congregation. Deacon Tim, a couple of questions I think have come in. Could you articulate those?
Yeah. So Kathy's asking, this is around the aspect of masking, and clearly the science is pretty clear about the need to mask. I don't know why people still resist that, but the question is around at Mass, we've been reducing our songs in the Mass, and the specific question is there a concern that the virus could spread through masks during singing at Mass?
The answer is yes. So I'm going to tell you there's 3 big ways to spread the virus. The third is by far and away the least important. It's still important, but it's the least important. One is the droplets from your mouth and your nose. So when you sing, you shout, you scream, any of those things, you project them further. So if I talk quietly, I'm going to have less force, and so those droplets will go a shorter distance. If you sing like me in church, I probably don't project too many droplets because I don't have a very good voice, and I'm like any other self-respecting person who sort of sings very quietly. But if you sing properly, you're projecting your voice and you're singing loudly. And then your droplets don't just go a few feet. They can go well beyond 6 feet. When you wear a mask, and there are videos you can Google and see online where they've done time-lapse photography and special color lights, laser lights to show this. If you cough real hard, you still can project a plume of respiratory droplets and aerosol even through a mask out multiple feet and beyond 6 feet. So singing is still a risk, as is loud talking or shouting or screaming or any of those things. The second, so droplets are the biggest risk. And so yes, Father and Tim, I think people need to be very careful about that, because in the early days, we proved without a doubt that tightly packed people like in a choir or a church singing, that it could infect most of the people in the room, certainly without masks. Masks help, but it's mask plus distance and plus behavior too. And so that's why we say the singing and shouting is an issue. The second thing is aerosols. This is where even if I'm not shouting or screaming loudly, I'm still projecting the air from my lungs and my mouth and nose into the air. And then things can be suspended and float in the air. We've all seen, like a mist or a fog, right? That's a suspended water in the air. There is a concern that when people are in a confined space over a period of time, that they expose, that the virus can linger in the air and potentially expose other people to it. So that concentration can increase over time. So there's still a lot of work being done to understand that more fully, but that's a concern, which is why we have to have you decrease the density in the church, which you're doing to have fewer people in there. And then the third one is surface contact. So if you sneeze or cough onto the rail of the pew in front of you, and someone else puts their hand on it shortly after there and then rubs their nose or scratches their eye, you could pick up the droplet that was on there and put it right into your eye, which is a mucous membrane, and infect yourself. So regular surface cleaning is sufficient for the surfaces. The aerosol, you just have to thin out and whenever possible, do things in public. And then the masks are important whenever you're near people outside your home. And then, yes, I think we should be careful about the singing.
Yep. Thank you. Another question comes in around, it says, Doctor, this is from, this is from Jennifer. Dr. Stack, could you please explain positivity rates to me? I have a difficult time understanding how the numbers can be so high, yet the positivity rates seem to fluctuate.
So these are all math equations at the end of the day. Positivity rate is the total number of positives divided by the total number of negatives. So there's two ways that the positivity rate can go up. You either have more positives relative to a stable denominator of total tests, or you have fewer tests done in the denominator, which makes the numerator proportionately bigger to the denominator. Okay, so what's happening here is we have increases in both. The numbers of tests being done are still increasing, and the number of positive people or people testing positive are still increasing. But the number of people testing positive is increasing faster than the number of new tests we're doing. And so that's why the percent positive is increasing. In Kentucky, we are testing very well. We are testing probably over 10% of the population in terms of raw numbers on a monthly basis. And initially, the federal government said the threshold was 2%, get over 2%. We have built an incredibly robust testing system in the state. So the problem, for the most part, I'm not saying that everybody always can get a test the way they want it, where they want it. I realize that life is more difficult than that. But for the most part, if you want a test, you can get it. And the problem is not that we don't have enough testing. The problem is just too many people are getting infected, and it's starting to overrun the system.
Okay. And then there's a question here. Let's see. Are there any COVID-19 guidelines for independent living senior facilities in Kentucky? I don't know how that's different from any senior facility, but that's the question from Sepida.
Well, the way I would interpret what Sepida says there is obviously senior living communities are higher risk because probably a high proportion of people in that setting are over 60 and puts them in a higher risk category. And then as we go on in life, we tend to get more medical problems. And so the combination of the two makes that a higher risk population. And then the question is a good one about, are there specific guidances for there? So we have a whole host of requirements for nursing homes and skilled nursing facilities, which is not the same thing as a senior living community. And I would say that I don't know if there's specific or discrete. I don't think there is just for that site. It's not on our webpage. I have no doubt that there's guidance out there, and probably at the Centers for Disease Control, if you were to Google or go to coronavirus.gov. So coronavirus.gov is the way to get to the CDC's website, or even type into Google CDC COVID-19, senior living, I think you would find there is probably a guidance document from the CDC, and I would encourage folks to take a look at that. It will say the same things fundamentally. You really should avoid communal dining as much as possible. You should stay in your independent residence as much as possible. You should always wear a mask when you're going to interact with other people. You should always keep 6 or more feet of distance between other residents. Those fundamental principles remain the same across all settings, and they are the tools that people could use in a senior living facility to try to keep themselves safe. So rather than go to the dining room, if they'll deliver the food and leave it at your door, that would be better. But again, I've already acknowledged the difficulties of social isolation. And so people need to make balanced decisions about how they can still get the human engagement they need to serve, to sustain themselves as humans, while still protecting themselves from the virus.
I'd like to jump in. I think a question that we have often is about the vaccine, and a vaccine for the virus. And general question would be your thoughts, and I think it would be how soon it will be that a vaccine might be discovered and then on the market, and then once there's a good chance for inoculations when that opens up, how much longer before we quote return to normal? And again, nobody's going to hold you to this. It's I'm sure some guesswork, but it's not just we discover the vaccine, one day and then the next day everything's back to normal. There's going to be a passage of time in there, and what are your thoughts on how that'll play out?
So one of the principles, hopefully, if you're a good physician, you learn is you never want to deprive people the opportunity for hope. You always want to be able to convey that there is reason to be hopeful and optimistic about the future, but you also don't want to, at least I believe, you don't want to deal in false hope, right? So I want to ground this in reality. Sure. A vaccine, and there will be more than one. There'll be more than one manufacturer, more than one different technology that creates the vaccines. It is an incredibly important part of our exit strategy to get away from this pandemic messing up all of our lives. But it is not in and of itself a silver bullet, nor will it just miraculously make this disappear. So if you think about this, we use vaccines to protect people from a lot of different illnesses and viruses, right? So we do this for measles and mumps and rubella and chickenpox and a whole host of other conditions. And it works very well, right? When's the last time anyone has known someone who had tetanus, right? But tetanus was horrible, and tetanus will kill you, right? So we don't have problems with these other viruses in large number because the vaccines work very well. But the illnesses still exist, and if we were to stop vaccinating people, they would resurge. Okay, coronavirus is going to be like that. I mean, think about the influenza vaccine, right? We have the opportunity to get a flu vaccine every year, but yet every year we still have to get a new flu vaccine because the virus changes, and people still get the flu. Lots of people every year, in fact. So for coronavirus, what we're going to have is hopefully have effective vaccines that protect a substantial number of people from getting the illness at all or getting it severely, and lowers the risk to the person who's vaccinated, but also lowers the risk to all the other people around them because there's fewer people susceptible to the infection to spread it to them. And so the vaccine is important, and matter of fact, it's essential, but it's not a complete silver bullet. So what will happen, probably the very first doses of the first couple of vaccines will begin being available, we anticipate, by mid-December, somewhere in that ballpark. But there'll be a very small number of doses initially. And those will go first to the healthcare workers who are exposed themselves to people who are infected with COVID, but also who could expose other patients to COVID who would be vulnerable. So we'll do healthcare workers, first responders, and that'll be phase 1A. And then in phase 1B, when the vaccine quantities begin to increase, we'll start hitting more healthcare workers, more critical workers, and more vulnerable people who are at highest risk. So somewhere in that phase 1B, in the beginning of phase 2, we will start to vaccinate nursing home residents, nursing home staff, people who work in prisons and jails, because those populations are at elevated risk and can't be, readily evacuated if need be. And then we'll hit the high risk people in phase 2. And then phase 3 will be when someone who's normal, healthy, a 30-year-old with no medical problems, if they want to get vaccinated, that'll be phase 3 because they're in a lower risk category. And then phase 4 will be catch everyone else who hasn't been vaccinated who wants to be vaccinated. So that whole journey will take every bit of all of next year, because we have to vaccinate 330 million Americans if they want to do it. No one's talking about forcing anyone to take a vaccine. This will be, if there's a vaccine, you have the option to get it, and we're committed to making it available, the federal government and the state government. But it'll be your choice. So we'll have to go through that journey, get people to get vaccinated to the fullest extent possible. And while we have more and more people protected, we're still going to have to wear masks. We're still going to have to socially distance until we get to a point where we have confidence that the overall population and the most vulnerable are safe or safer. And then at some point, there'll be a different risk benefit analysis, right? If enough people are protected and the most vulnerable still are able to do additional measures to keep themselves safe, then probably the rest of society will start returning to more activity. And just understand that, like many other risks we have in life, this is one of the many risks, just like getting in a car accident or having some other injury or illness. This will be added to the list, but its danger to all of society will not be of the same severity at that point.
So Dr. Stack, on a follow-up on that vaccine, we have certain vaccines like the flu shot, we call it the flu shot, is sort of an annual thing. And we have the like once or twice a lifetime polio or whatever. What kind of a vaccine is the COVID vaccine going to be? Will it be more like the flu shot as an annual thing or what?
So the simple and unfulfilling answer is we don't know. We don't know how. So some immunizations provide, multi-year, multi-decade, or maybe lifelong immunity. Other vaccines only provide, a shorter time limited. So we're all accustomed to getting a tetanus booster, right? If you cut your foot or cut your arm, that if you've been 5 or 10 years since your last booster, you get a booster. Well, each disease and how our immune system responds in each vaccine, it's a different combination. So we don't know. I think most people, unfortunately, anticipate that getting an annual or a periodic coronavirus vaccine may be part of our new reality, at least for the foreseeable future. I think that's what most people would speculate.
Okay. And I think there's an important question here, comes in from Shannon. She says, I have family who are questioning the necessity of masking if you're not sick. What's the purpose of this? I've heard that masking isn't preventative or helpful for healthy, not sick people. So if you know you're not sick, why wear a mask?
Because a lot of people are sick and don't know they're sick. So 20 to 40% of people who have coronavirus don't have symptoms. So they don't even know they're sick. And yet they have enough virus in their body that they can spread infection to other people. So if you think about this particularly dangerous infection and a particularly deadly weapon, if you will, because I, with no malintent, no desire to cause harm to anyone else, could have infection, could say, I don't need a mask. I feel fine. I'm not sick. And sit across from someone or my whole family. So be careful at Thanksgiving. Seriously, be very careful. You put 40 or 50 people around the tables. My family's like everyone else. We put 50 people in a space that was designed to hold 15, okay? We'd have card tables and coffee table. We'd have all sorts of anything we could have, folding chairs, and pack everyone in there and laugh and eat and celebrate and drink wine and have a great time, right? That's Thanksgiving. If you do that and you have one person go in that room and sit there for an hour, the statistics we've seen in other settings, you could easily infect 2/3 of the people who are at that dinner with you and not even know you have the infection. And maybe your fever, because you're infectious, we think, for up to 2 days or so before you even develop symptoms. So you could develop a fever the day after Thanksgiving and then realize, oh my gosh, I could have COVID-19. And the damage is already done. You could have infected everybody who was at Thanksgiving dinner. And then the problem is, once you've done that, people who are over 60 and have medical problems are clearly at much higher risk. But I'll just tell you right now, I know a 40-year-old who has been out of work for 3 weeks and isn't going to be back next week either, who was perfectly healthy, thin, lean, active, and couldn't breathe and was on oxygen, 40-year-old. I know a 37-year-old that I just found out yesterday who developed a blood clot in their lung. Their 2.5-year-old was infected. That's the first infection they found in the family. Then the wife and the husband got infected. The grandmother is in the hospital already. And now the other person, the young person under 40, developed a blood clot in their lung related to COVID-19 and is now in the hospital. I think people have to be very careful about a false sense of confidence that I know that I'm fine and that this is just made up. And
How often do you think, Joe, average should be tested?
Well, so I think that one, if people are complying with the guidelines, social distancing, mask wearing, and they don't have any high risk exposures, I think that you can exercise responsibly a wide latitude in how often you should get tested. Maybe you just do it periodically. If someone's really concerned, they're with a vulnerable person, maybe every couple of weeks. If someone really isn't around high risk people, maybe once a month, just to get tested. But if you feel fine, have no symptoms, and you're not exposing other people, like around high risk communities, you probably don't have to go get tested all the time. But there's a whole lot of us who do things like work as waiters or waitresses, work as cash register attendants, who work, in, say, a nursing home setting, who work in a healthcare setting. Those folks are in a situation where they could expose a lot of other people or themselves be exposed. And then maybe every couple of weeks, if you have access to it, is a reasonable frequency to get tested.
And I think that I've been tested a few times since this all broke. And I think back to that original question, all the test tells me is when I took the test, I didn't have COVID. I can't walk around for the next week going, I'm not sick, so I can now not wear a mask, right? Yeah. It's a statement in time. And I could go to the grocery store, or I could be somewhere, even in a small family gathering. And even though I had that test and it came back negative 2 days ago, I still need to be very careful that even I can say I don't have it. No, I can say I didn't have it 2 days ago. I don't know what my situation is right now.
So Deacon Tim, let me add to that real quick. This is really important. And I've said this repeatedly. We cannot test our way out of this problem. The testing is a tool. It is not a cure. It's not a treatment. It's not a solution. But here's the thing that's particularly challenging. And for folks who are listening, if you get tested and you are positive, please stay home and isolate until you are cleared. We have had stories and examples of people who have gotten tested, been positive, and then said, to heck with this, I'm not following the guidance. You're not telling me what to do. And so then they go right back out in public and disregard the guidance. So there's a whole lot of things I don't understand in life. This is just one of them. But I don't understand why you would seek out a test. And then when you find out you have the disease, then proceed to ignore all the guidance that is given to you. I mean, I don't understand why you asked for the test in the first place. Why would you want to know the answer if you're not going to follow the guidance? But please, if you are asked to, here's the other perverse negative cycle. People who want to skip quarantine and don't quarantine, and people who want to skip isolation and not isolate if they have the infection. All of that just makes the problem grow. And when it starts growing fast enough, it grows exponentially. And so some of the graphs we show when the bar graphs start to climb really fast. And that's when you get in trouble. So please, we're not here to curtail people's flexibilities and freedoms. We're really just here to keep the vulnerable and all the rest of us safe from a harm that we have seen in so many places is really significant.
Dr. Stack, we know we've got limited time yet in the program, and maybe a final words might be some reflections on the present surge and what we need to do. We don't have to analyze necessarily what got us there, but we do have to know how to get through it or how to avoid making it deeper. I've heard people even say, well, the cases are increasing, but they're not as severe. I've heard people, reflecting on, isolation fatigue or pandemic fatigue. And, we see the example, I guess, of the sports world where people are out there now a little bit more, and it's almost like a magnet in terms of how we want to operate. Can you speak to that, kind of wrapping up in terms of how we can get through this surge we're in the midst of now?
In an ideal world, well, I don't know. In an ideal world, we would never have coronavirus, right? That would be the ideal world. So, if we were to shut down everything for 2 months, the virus would just disappear. It wouldn't spread to anybody. If we just all stayed in our homes and never went out, it would dissipate and we wouldn't have a crisis. That's not going to happen. Society worldwide, it's not just the United States. So I think people have to put this in context. Sometimes we unfortunately want to argue you're liberal, you're conservative, you're a Democrat, you're Republican, you're Southern, you're Northern. I don't care. It's none of those things. It is you're human and this pathogen will come after you. That's just what it is. And if you look, people in Europe and people in other countries, in other continents, but other countries are having the same struggle we are with pandemic fatigue and wanting to get back to life and the need to run their businesses and have their children in school. We're all facing this. So first of all, let's just lift above it and realize it's all of us. And then the tools we have, well, I know it's frustrating. We sound like broken records. They are the same. Stay 6 feet away from everyone not in your household. Wear a mask whenever you are out in public, all the time. Wash your hands or sanitize them if you don't have soap and water nearby. Cover your cough and sneeze. Stay home if you are sick. If you are sick, do not go to work or school until you are better, until your fever is gone and you feel better. Please, we don't need anyone to be sick with anything now, because the fear and worry is going to be it's coronavirus, not that you just have the common cold. And then the final thing is, if you have symptoms or think you were exposed in a high-risk way, get tested so that you can have that information so you know if you have to isolate, particularly if you have symptoms. Those are the things we can do, Father, to try to get through this. And look, I hope we're going to have some vaccines available in December, and then in 2021 start having escalating amounts of vaccine. So I'm cautiously hopeful that 2021, while it won't start much better than 2020 ends, that it will progressively get better as the year goes on.
Well, thank you very much. This has been a great interview. Thanks for sharing and your understanding and your wisdom, but also sharing your heart as we've gone along here. So thank you so much. Blessings to you and your work, your mission, and your ministry. And as the governor says, it makes an awful lot of sense. We can get through this, and we can get through it together. Thanks for being a big part of it. A great leader as we're moving forward. So God bless you, and glad to have you as a member of our parish. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. Thank you, Deacon Tim. Have a wonderful day.
You guys. All right, you too. So, Father Paul, what's coming up next week?
Well, next week we'll be talking with Father Danny Schwendeman. Father Danny is the director of priestly vocations for our diocese, and this upcoming week is focused on vocations to the priesthood. We're all asked to pray for vocations, and we'll talk about some of the elements involved in the journey of a person towards the priesthood. And I think also, just the world being the way it is, to talk about ways for family members and friends to offer encouragement and, if you will, maybe words of wisdom for people who have the right stuff, who are thinking about it, who seem to be praying about it, who's perhaps are being called. And, we need to keep moving into the future, and we need more and more good folks who will be serving the church as priests. So that's kind of the program we'll be having next week.
All right, very good. I just I was thinking back. Father Larry Richards was here several years ago as our Lenten mission speaker, and he had this funny habit. At first, I thought it was funny. I asked him about it. He just, if he saw any, like a teenage kid or even a younger boy walking around, he says, "Hey, kid, you ever think about being a priest?" And he would do that. I was like, I saw him do it like multiple times, just walking. So I asked him back in the sacristy. I said, "Yeah, what do you do that?" He says, for a lot of these kids, they're never asked that question. He says, so if the kid looks at him funny, he's okay with that. But he says too many boys never have been posed that question, and he's just trying to plant those seeds. So it ought to be a great conversation next week. So
Yeah, we all know some folks who have the right stuff. So it's just a matter, and we know they could choose a lot of different ways to make a difference in the world. But there's certainly the need for priests. So.
Yep. So we're going to be at the regular time next week.
We'll be at 10 o'clock. Yep.
All right, Thursday, 10 o'clock. So blessings
to all who watched with us today, and the great questions that came from the audience, and I'm sure you were speaking for other people. We could have probably gone another hour with our conversation with Dr. Stack. It's been a good program today. So thanks to all for tuning in, and Deacon Tim, thanks for guiding us along.
You're quite welcome. And so we'll see everybody next Thursday at 10 a.m. for the next round of